everyone, this is John and I welcome you back to another episode of the Subcontinent. Our program aims to address important issues in the region of South Asia which affect the governments, people, organizations and the region as a whole. We will try to explain the issues, break down controversies surrounding them and try to have some external perspectives from experts and people.
In this edition of the Subcontinent, we are going to talk about Russian Foreign Minister's visit to India and Pakistan, as well as its significance for the geopolitics of Asia. And we shall take a look at the recent nationwide protests in Pakistan and why Islamabad banned a hardline religious group in the country.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov recently visited India and then went to Pakistan. Lavrov's visit may herald a new era of ties with the subcontinent. Apart from the significance of Moscow's move to mend the frayed relations with the Asian countries, the visits can potentially impact Washington's policies regarding Islamabad and New Delhi.
Earlier this month, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov took a two-day trip to India, where he met his Indian counterpart Subramaniam Jaishankar. Lavrov then travelled to Pakistan from New Delhi. Moscow says a special and privileged strategic partnership with India is one of Russia's foreign policy priorities. And during their joint press conference, the two foreign ministers reiterated the time-tested nature as well as the remarkable resilience of their bilateral ties in the face of the increasing difficulties that have marred their relations in recent times. 2020 was especially troubled for India-Russia ties as their annual summit was cancelled for the first time in 2 decades. Although the respective ministries said that the summit was cancelled because of the COVID-19 pandemic, some reports speak of more other reservations, because throughout the pandemic, India held bilateral and multilateral meetings virtually with other partners. Jaishankar and Lavrov talked about the international North-South Transport Corridor and the Chennai-Vladivostok Eastern Maritime Corridor. But many believe that the focus of Lavrov's visit to the region was on the Afghanistan peace process. In Islamabad, Lavrov said that Russia and Pakistan had convergent positions on the Afghan peace process.
All right, now let's look at the map of Asia. The North-South Transport Corridor is the 72,000-kilometer-long multi-mode network of ship, rail and road routes for moving freight between Russia, Azerbaijan, Iran and India. The objective of the corridor is to increase trade connectivity between major cities such as Mumbai, Moscow and Tehran, among others. Traditionally, the Indo-Russian strategic partnership has been built on 5 major components: politics, defense and military equipment, civil nuclear energy, anti-terrorism cooperation and space technology. However, in recent years, a 6th economic component has grown in importance, with both countries setting a target of reaching $30 billion in bilateral trade by 2025, from about $9.4 billion in the year 2017. India is the second largest market for Russian defense industry. In 2017 alone, approximately 68% of Indian military hardware came from Russia, making Russia the chief supplier of defense equipment. According to a poll in 2014, almost 85% of Russians viewed India positively, while only 9%, a very small chunk, viewed them negatively. Similarly, a 2017 opinion poll by the Moscow-based non-governmental think tank Levada Center states that Russians identified India as one of their top 5 friends, with the others being Belarus, China, Kazakhstan and Syria.
There have been substantial shifts in the geopolitical dynamics of global powers in recent years, with differences deepening between the US and China and the US and Russia. This is while Sino-Russian ties are, in Lavrov's words, the highest in history, and China and India are well set to become economic powerhouses before mid-century, thus playing significant strategic roles in their regions and beyond. Therefore, the United States needs new policies to balance Russia's closer connections to Pakistan and India. Lavrov was unable to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi in Delhi because the latter was campaigning in West Bengal, although John Kerry, the US presidential envoy, did manage a meeting the following day. During the joint presser with Lavrov, Jaishankar's mind was so preoccupied with Washington's reaction that when he was describing the cordial nature of the relationship, he said India-US instead of India-Russia.
Of India-US relations.
Now, to learn more about the Russian Foreign Minister's visit to India and Pakistan, we are joined by Mr. Mark Sleboda. He's the International Relations and Security Analyst. Mr. Sleboda, welcome to this show. So, what is the significance of Lavrov's visit to the subcontinent?
Okay, so Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's visit to India and then to Pakistan has been primarily billed as an attempt to reset Russian-Indian relations after there is some indication that in the last few years they have moved farther and farther apart. There is an annual Russian-Indian summit that is usually held. The summit was canceled last year, ostensibly because of the coronavirus crisis, which does make a certain amount of sense. But there's also a lot of talk, particularly in Moscow, that the Kremlin was not looking forward to the meeting anyway and was happy to cancel it to signal its displeasure at the Indian moving strategically into cooperation with the Quad, with the United States, directed against China, whatever India may make denials about, and this Indo-Pacific policy. Russia regards this as a attempt to form an Asian NATO, and that the grouping not only threatens China, which is Russia's strong strategic partner now, but also the Russian position in the Pacific as well. So this meeting was an attempt to, I would say, rather than reset, to manage a minimum amount of maintenance to the Russian-Indian relationship. But the two have moved quite far apart in the last 4 or 5 years. In 2014, when Modi first came to office, he was quite famously asked about the relationship, and he said that if he asked any Indian child which country is the greatest friend of India, and that it would be Russia, because they have Russia has always been there in times of crisis for India.
Okay, so how is the current status of India-Russia ties? Did Lavrov's India trip reset the ties to a better direction? Does Lavrov trip mean anything really in terms of the dynamics of Russia's relations with India?
Yeah, I don't think that there is any positive change because of Lavrov's trip to India. In fact, Lavrov was unable, presumably, to meet with the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, supposedly because he was campaigning in West Bengal. And Lavrov met instead only with his counterpart, the Indian Foreign Minister. However, the very next day, the U.S.'s President Biden's special climate envoy, John Kerry, who was formerly the U.S. Secretary of State under Obama, he did meet with Modi. So that is makes clear the priorities, strategic priorities of India's prime minister in this situation. Whereas when Lavrov then went to Pakistan, he met with both the Pakistani defense minister and the Pakistani Prime Minister Khan. That is Islamabad clearly signaling that Russia is higher in their priority than Russia is for India. And that's not a good indication.
How would these visits impact India-US relationship? How would the United States see and react to such developments?
I think the United States will look very favorably on the outcome of Lavrov's visit to India. The awkwardness, that was clear, the failure to make any kind of breakthrough, and even the failure of Lavrov to meet with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. There has been some suggestion that the U.S. demanded of India that they do not allow a meeting between their Prime Minister and the Russian Foreign Minister. That is, it's purely speculation. But there is no question that the United States has ever increasing influence on India, and that India is being incredibly receptive to that influence. India, while Lavrov was there, the Indian foreign minister made clear to say that it regards it is looking for inclusive cooperation, and it is not directed against anyone, and that its relationships with Russia are not dependent on, or Russia or any other country are not dependent on its relations with any third country. Well, that is clearly false. That is a false statement, because quite definitely India's relationships with other countries is now determined by what the United States wants and dictates. One clear example of that is that India, which was a major purchaser of Iranian oil in mid-2019 at the demands of the United States, stopped purchasing Iranian oil because of the U.S. Trump administration's unilateral illegal sanctions imposed on Iran as the U.S. unilaterally pulled out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So that's India quite clearly working against its own energy interests and energy security, a long relationship with Iran at the demands of the United States.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sloboda, for being with us on our show. It was nice having you here. Viewers, let's take a quick look at how people on social media and cyberspace have reacted to this development. Please stay with us.
Riaz Haq has wrapped up all the important feats of the Russian foreign minister to the subcontinent. Nutan Nihar has highlighted the role of the West in Moscow's ties with India. Ahmed Quraishi has pointed out that Afghanistan is a converging issue where all of the involved countries are working together. Akhtar Navid Sayed has responded to another post, noting that the United States is the only player in Afghanistan that is not from the region. He says Washington is the imperialist in this game. Bilal Ahmed Ghaffar has elaborated on the Russian blank check for India, citing gas pipelines, corridors and defense cooperation as some areas of interest.
Islamabad has banned Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan amid violent anti-France protests by the far-right party. Although this group has terrorized religious minorities in Pakistan, including Shias by the way, over bogus charges of blasphemy, its demand of boycotting French products and expelling the French envoy is not totally unwarranted. After all, it is the French Islamophobia that is fueling this anger and outrage across the country as well as the world.
Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, or TLP, is an extremist group with a history of atrocities on religious minorities within the country. However, the group was not banned until mid-April in the midst of large and violent protests against France. Despite the government's measures under the country's Anti-Terrorism Act of 1997, the group threatened further demonstrations if Islamabad did not comply with its demands. Since November, the group has been calling for the expulsion of the French ambassador and a ban on all French goods over repeated incidents of blasphemous sacrilegious remarks against Muslim Prophet Muhammad and their official patronage by the French government. Earlier in the month, police arrested TLP chief Saad Rizvi, the son of party founder Khadim Hussein Rizvi, who died of natural causes shortly after the November protests. The arrest sparked days of unrest, with thousands of TLP supporters launching protests and blocking roads and highways across the country. The protests by the TLP continued in pockets across the country last week, with Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid confirming that several policemen had been killed and kidnapped, while hundreds of others were wounded by demonstrators.
The Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan came into existence and subsequently rose to fame after the hanging of Mumtaz Qadri, the person who killed Punjab Governor Salman Taseer. Masses of TLP supporters came in support of Mumtaz Qadri, calling him a fallen hero instead of a killer. The group, whose members mainly belong to the Barelvi school of Islamic thought, is known for its countrywide street power and massive protests in opposition to change to Pakistan's blasphemy law.
The Pakistani government declared Tehreek-e-Labbaik a terrorist organization and carried out a couple of security operations against its protesting followers, but the group is not willing to settle down on anything short of expulsion of French ambassador. The rallies are going on somehow unabated, while the public outrage against the French acts of sacrilege has given a stronger footing to the TLP. The government of Imran Khan is now weighing its choices to handle the situation, while the anti-France sentiments are still on the rise in Pakistan. The government has resumed negotiations with the TLP, but it seems to be running out of options but to rescind the ban on the activities of this political and religious outfit.
Now, to have more insight and analysis, we are joined by Mr. Muzammil Maqbool. He's the founder of Rumi Center for Global Peace. Mr. Maqbool, starting off, why has Islamabad banned Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan? What is this group and what do they want? What is the cause of the recent violent protests in Pakistan?
Islamabad banned TLP recently, and there were a lot of reasons. First of all, the reason is that this Islamist group is trying to intervene in the matters of the federal government. They are trying to tame the government in a lot of issues. For example, there was when Charlie Hebdo cartoons were published, the government promised this party that they will take this matter internationally and they will make sure that these issues should be raised, issues like Islamophobia, racial slurs, and issues against the article of faith about our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But then they started intervening into government matters, taming the government, telling them that giving them ultimatums, which is actually wrong. So we are not dealing with Ummah, we are dealing with a nation, a sovereign nation like Pakistan, and in a nation, if you will tame a federal government and tell them what to do and what not to do, creates a lot of problems. So this compelled Ministry of Interior Affairs and Ministry of Home Affairs to go ahead and ban this organization under the Terrorist Act. This organization is nothing but the hardliner, hardcore Islamist organization who believes that Sharia law, the hardcore Sharia law, should be implemented across the nation, across Pakistan, and they have always been anti minority when it comes to Shias, when it comes to Hazaras, when it comes to Ahmadis in Pakistan, and they sort of have created a paradigm in minds of people across the world that, especially in Pakistan, that these are the only people who love Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and they try to create or present a narrative of Islam which is totally wrong. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is prophet for you, prophet for me, and everyone else. He has been a merciful man ever sent to this entire universe by Almighty Allah. So this is what it is, and our Prophet Muhammad is Rahmatul lil Alamin for everyone. But the narrative they set is that they only know how to love Prophet, how to show love for Prophet, and how to handle Islam is totally wrong. So this actually made the entire federal government to go ahead and ban this entire TLP, Tehreek-e-Labbaik, Pakistan.
What can Pakistan do about nationwide protests against diplomats or authorities of another country? In this case, France.
Nationwide protests. Pakistan tried to do a lot of things, before these protests, before the TLP hit the streets. So they spoke with them in the month of November, December, January, and February as well, and they promised TLP. Khan's government promised TLP that they would discuss this entire issue in Parliament. But before that, TLP were openly and covertly trying to plan to hit the streets of Islamabad and occupy every street, lane, and road. Pakistan tried their best to make sure that they will try to bridge the gap in between TLP and the federal government, but things could not work out. That is the reason they banned them. But then there has been n number of requests, n number of discussions by the federal government with TLP to stop these protests. The best thing federal government can do right now to reach other people of the TLP, like there are other spokespersons, there is Amir and the a deputy Amir of TLP. They can reach other people and try to break down things slowly. This is what can happen. And secondly, as I was going through the speech of Imran Khan today, he promised that he will raise the Islamophobia issue around the world and make sure that all the countries around the world will stop playing with the emotions, stop playing on the article of fate, which is related to our religion and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and will make sure that it should not happen again. And he also promised the entire nation that he wants other OIC members, 50 plus odd countries who are in OIC. He wants them to intervene in this issue and make sure that it should get stopped once for all. Like the Holocaust thing happened, no one talks about that, and even in many countries, it's banned. People get jailed if they talk about Holocaust. So these things, Pakistan government has to be preempt on this and give a lot of assurance right now to these leaders and the deputy leaders, amirs of this TLP, and make sure that things should settle down as soon as possible. And at the same time, there is a lot of work and a lot of machinery work which Pakistan government have to start as soon as possible. And they have to speak with these spokespersons, with these main founding members of TLP who have founded this in 2016, and make sure that things should settle down as soon as possible. As a sovereign nation, Pakistan has to go ahead and make sure that they will break the communication barrier, which is getting bigger and bigger every minute passing by.
All right, that marks the end of this session. Thank you so much, Mr. Maqbool, for being with us. Viewers, now let's see what people have said online about TLP and the protests in Pakistan.
Ruhan Ahmed has shared the list of banned groups in which the TLP has been added. The Defense 360 account has talked about the government's inability to handle the pro-TLP protests, saying that Pakistan's elite forces have been deployed across the country to control the rallies. Imar Khan has underlined that Pakistan's religious scholars have never condoned the protests by the TLP and its followers. Hina Qureshi says the protests were aggravated following the arrest of the extremist group's young leader.
All right, that was our episode about some latest developments across the subcontinent, from the Russian foreign minister visit to India and Pakistan, as well as the violent anti-France protests throughout Pakistan. To watch bits of our episodes or to find more updates, please follow us on our social media platforms, and please make sure to give us feedback about what you think. We will meet same time, same day next week. Thank you.